in alchemy, there is something called fire, earth, air, and water that we hear about so often. And the ancients believed that the fire, earth, air, and water and two other substances were the key to everything. They were really, they usually only talk about those four. That's because they leave out the most important one. They always keep that one secret. And that one's sometimes referred to as ether. But ether and prana are the same thing. Or ether and prana and tachyon energy are the same thing. It's all the same thing. And again, this was the most sacred shape of the ancients. And this is the one that was ether. They all have amounts, and I'll tell you what they are right now. This is according to the Pythagorean school and tied back to Egypt. This one here, the tetrahedron, was fire. And it's a pyramid. There's 3-sided, 4-sided, and 5-sided pyramids. And pyramid means fire in the midst. And the cube is earth. It's denseness and matter. And the octahedron is air. It's the 8th element of the periodic table. And the icosahedron is water. And the dodecahedron is ether. And the little sphere, the sphere, I have a little sphere. The sphere is voidness. There's 6 elements that create the universe. Voidness, fire, earth, air, water, and ether. And they all have shape, as everything does. And they happen to have the primary shapes of the universe. So these 6 shapes of the sphere, the tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, icosahedron, and the dodecahedron are the ABCs of the alphabet, of the whole thing. They are what create the underlying structures. All structures are based upon them. And these are just like some of the mathematical relationships, how one thing fits inside the next and fits inside the next. In sacred geometry, it's called nesting, where one cube will fit to the next one, will form the next one, will go to the next one, and you just couldn't do this normally. It acts like magic. It's amazing what it can do. To show you one shape, here's a cube. Does everybody see the cube? Can you see the centers of each of the faces are connected together, forming a little tiny octahedron in the middle? Does everybody see that? Can you see it? Does anybody not see it? It's a little, one of these guys in the middle, sitting like that. So you have those two linked together. At the same time, it's a star tetrahedron. Which is one of those guys that you see sitting right there. So the star tetrahedron has an octahedron in the middle of it. If you're going to make one, you can just take an octahedron and make those little triangular shapes and stick them on each of the faces, and you got one of those. And then you can make fancy ones like this. Isn't that pretty? Okay, now, I'm about to take this abstract information that came out of the first system of the fruit of life and apply it directly into life so you can see how life uses it. We're going to first look at crystals, and then we're going to look at biological life forms like you and see how in these two areas that these are used.
I don't understand those two, why those are feminine.
It's kind of like understanding why a straight line is male and a curved line is female. It's something that you begin to intuit after a while. the longer you work in this stuff, you keep coming up with these patterns tend to be things that are associated with male, and these patterns tend to be associated with female. For example, the hexagon, the cube is either a square or a hexagon or an octahedron. I mean, an 8-sided. Anything that's 4, 6, or 8 are associated with a cube. If you look at life forms that are on Earth, that are on land, if you go into water, which is female, you go into the oceans, you'll find an overwhelming number of them are based on 5. Like the starfish, for example, and the sand dollar, and you can go on and on and on and on and on. A lot of this 5-ness. Now, there's going to be exceptions on both sides. Like there's going to be the what do you call it? The octopus, for example, has 8. But if you list them all, and if you see them, you'll see this huge amount as 5-ness on here and 6-ness on land, showing you can see where the water aspect pulls things more that are female and more on the 5-sided. So it's like you start working this, and it's more like an intuitive thing to come up with this. And then when you look at the brain functions, and you start looking at the logical patterns of the male, they keep coming up being 3-sided and 4-sided, and the female side is 3-sided and 5-sided.
But isn't all the males inside the females there also?
What? All the males inside the female?
Aren't they contained in all those female?
Each one of these contains the others in various ways.
Okay.
It's in a circle around the outside.
Oh, the female contains them all, yeah. The female contains all the male. But the male also contains all the other ones, too. There's one male form that does. There's 2 forms there that are very special. The sphere is the mommy, and the cube is the daddy. It's the big daddy, and the sphere is the big mama. And the mama will contain all of the 5 female shapes, but the cube will also contain all the other 4 males, including the mommy. None of the other ones will do that, but this one will. And by that, in a very special way, you can take a sphere, symmetrically you can put them in a cube. You can take a sphere and slide it right in there, and it would symmetrically touch perfectly. And then you can take this one, and it will fit in like that. If you made the size just right, it will just slide right in. One of the tetrahedron edges become the diagonals across the cube. And that's another one of the keys, by the way, is the diagonals. The diagonals, as you'll see as this unfolds, is almost always where the hinge is. It's where the secret of anything you're trying to find will usually be found along the diagonals. And so the tetrahedron and the sphere will fit in there. The octahedron is easy because you just connect the centers of it, and that will slide right in there perfectly if you get the size just right. These two female forms, though, it doesn't look like they would ever go in there symmetrically until you notice something about them. And that is, if you put them just like this, so that they're a hexagonal view, you have an edge in the front and another edge exactly the same in the back. And then you have a symmetrical edge along this side and another symmetrical edge along the top and the bottom. So you can take this and just go right inside of a cube, and this little edge will fit right in the center of each face, symmetrically and perfectly. And you can do the same thing with this one. You got to turn it just right to like this. Now there's an edge across the front, and there's another edge exactly the same across the back. There's a left, and there's a right, and there's a top, and there's a bottom, and it'll just slide right in there. And so the cube, by its very nature, contains the proportions of all the other ones, including the sphere. And so the cube and the sphere are the 2 most important of these shapes. This is why, for anyone who has studied Walter Russell, anybody know about Walter Russell? Walter Russell's work, the reason it worked, he didn't know anything about sacred geometry. If he had he would have leaped in consciousness. He didn't know it existed, or he would have been super brilliant. He's already super brilliant, but he would have really went out there if he'd have known about this. But he picked the 2 right shapes. He picked the cube and the sphere to be the basis of his philosophy. And because he did, he was able to do a great deal of things that could have chosen other shapes and he would have been incorrect. And just even in the Bible says that the throne of God is so many cubits this way and so many cubits this way, etc. And when you make one, it's a cube. And the chair that all the Egyptians sat on, have you ever noticed it? It's a cube with a little back on it. The cube is a really, really, really important male form. It's probably the most male form that there is, whereas the sphere is the most female form that there is.
For the purpose of raising one's level of consciousness or ascending or whatever, what would be the most ideal structure to have, to live in?
To sit in?
To live in. Like if you could build your own house any shape you wanted.
All kinds of people trying to study that right now, and I really don't know. I don't think that that's going to really matter that much. Relative to the, once you get the Merkaba going and that aspect of your fields going, it won't matter what the shape of the building you're in. It won't matter anything, nothing, no outside influence can influence what's internally inside the Merkaba. And so, but there is, if you want to look at Opera Mills' work, which I'll give you, he makes this shape for people to get into, a big one that you can climb into, and has reflective things which are incredible. It really is amazing when you're inside of these things. Yeah, because what it does, how they reflect energy back. And my thought was to do a lot of Wilhelm Reich's work with the doorbusters, and you know what that is, and he's created mirrors for life energy that reflect prana using steel wool and cotton in certain thicknesses, and it reflects it just like a mirror. And you can make these blankets. Of course, they're illegal in the United States. Yeah, because they don't work. But if they don't work, then who cares? Whatever they. But they do work, because if you lay in one of these things, you can only stay under there about 30 seconds. You go screaming out from underneath it because they're so powerful. He used to make these rooms that look like outhouses, because he didn't know anything about shape. Made out of these walls that were steel wool and cotton, and steel wool and cotton, and certain things. And you go in there, and it reflects all your life energy back at you. You can't stay in one of those rooms more than about 15 minutes. I mean, you'll kick the door down to get out of there. It's healing to a point, but if it gets too much, it will actually make you sick. If you get too much, it's just like you get OD'd on it. But if they could make those, I've always wanted to make one of those things like this, where it really reflected, not only did it mirrored it, but reflected it and focused it. You could put it right into a certain chakra, and you'd probably stay in there for like 2 seconds and jump out or something. But I've never done that kind of stuff. There's a lot of real fun experimentation that you could do on this, and then the effects that these have on consciousness. They do affect you dramatically. You can just sit in them and feel the differences. You can also look at the work of, say, Greg Hogue, who Metaforms, who makes all kinds of pyramidal structures and things that you can sit in and experiment with that. For example, if you sit inside of a pyramid where you got a 51 degree, 51 second, 51 degrees, 51 minutes, 24 second degree angle, it's the angle of the Great Pyramid, and if you sit in there and you align it properly and you go to sleep, your first couple nights might be a little strange, but after that, you'll find that you get about 3 or 4 hours. Has anybody ever done this? Yeah. Well, you probably found the same. I'll just tell you what I found. You can tell me if you found the same thing. I found 3 to maybe 4 hours of sleep, and you wake up, and that's it, baby. You don't need any more. And what did you find?
I just wanted the dimensions again.
Of what?
Of the pyramid.
It's just the Great Pyramid. You can get that anywhere. It's the angle, 51 degrees, 51 minutes, 24 seconds. And it focuses a pyramid reflects a sphere perfectly if the angle is right. And so when it reflects your life force energy right back at you. and you just regenerate very quickly. This is an X-ray pattern of a beryl, I think it's a beryl, yeah, it's a beryl crystal. It's an X-ray diffraction pattern. And it is one of the closest means of actually seeing into crystals to see how their atoms are arranged and physically looking in there and looking at them. I just wanted to show you this one to notice how the atoms are arranged, and you can actually see the flower of life pattern in there. You see it? So why do atoms just happen to arrange in these sacred patterns? This is one of a salt crystal here. It's another diffraction pattern. And if you notice, a salt crystal is a cube, and you see the cubical nature of these patterns in there. Now, these are atoms. Each one of these little black spots is an atom. And if you notice, the atoms are spheres. Now, what we've really got here is this little speck of nothingness. If this was an atom this big, you got a little tiny speck you can hardly see with these electrons that are probably somewhere around them. The electrons are moving around the central core at 9/10 the speed of light. The speed of light is 186,200 miles a second. That's miles a second. And this is a speck you can hardly see, and these little electrons are moving around in 1 second. That little electron has gone around that point that you can't even see, something like 160,000 miles. It's inconceivable. I mean, I used to sit there in physics going, nah, they're pulling my leg, you know, thinking, nah. And so they're moving so fast as they move around that you can't see them, but they form what's called an electron cloud, or a sphere. It's a spherical cloud on the outer shell. And so all of your atoms that form all of the fabric of the nature are little spheres. It goes right past us. And so the whole fabric is made out of spheres. There's spheres all over the place. Light, all the light waves moving through space are all spheres. We normally think of a light wave doing this kind of thing, right? A little thing going through it like that. But you don't have this little thing going down there through cross space. If you took, say, a light inside this cube and flashed it, and these were flashed in all directions, well, you don't have a cubical pattern of light moving off from there. Even though you look down and you see a cube, if you looked back from it a few thousand miles back, you'd see a cube. But the pattern that's going off there isn't cubical, because a light wave that leaves the center of this surface going straight up in 1 second is 186,200 miles away. This one is also the one that's going off the point of the edge is 186,200 miles away. And when you think about how far that is, and the distances between those two beams are almost identical, the only difference is this little tiny bit of difference. You couldn't see the difference. In 1 second, you have a near perfect sphere of light leaving that cube. In 2 seconds, that little tiny difference, which always is always there, approaches zero very, very quickly. It never actually reaches it, but so you have these waves of light expanding off of objects that are spheres. And so all your light waves out there are all these just interacting spheres of light waves. Even if you have really big things, then it just means that it takes longer for them to become spheres. That's all it is. So you've got this sphericalness all over the place, both in cosmic levels, microcosmic levels. The atoms are all different sizes of spheres depending on how many electron shells they go out from and what their internal structure is. And depending on whether or not they have all of their outer electrons or don't, and by what, they're going to either have a positive or a negative charge on their outer electron shell, And that is the primary basis of chemistry. What things will join and will not join together, though there are other factors. Size has a big factor in all of it. And all of those things, again, are little spheres. They join together in patterns that look, these are the basic ones, the linear one, of 2 big ones and a little one in the middle, which is a straight line, or 3 big ones and a little one in the middle, which is a triangle, or in a tetrahedron, or in an octahedron, or in a cube. And they now know about the other 2, the icosahedron and dodecahedral patterns, which are the rest of the possibilities. And everything, all other possibilities come out of that, which I'll be able to show you in just a moment. And then, so you get say, 8 little atoms that come and form a cube, and who knows why, but they form this perfect cube. And then you get 4 more that come over here and link with these 4 and form these 3-dimensional structures that are called lattices. And so you have a cube connected to a cube, connected to a cube, etc., like this. And these are the lattice structures that form crystalline structures in metals, and these kinds of things that exist throughout nature. Again, no one knows why they form these particular patterns. All they know is they do. Sometimes they get very complex and forming all kinds of geometrical shapes inside of there. But if you were to carefully look at the way the atoms formed in geometrical shapes, you would find that you would be able to trace them back to one of these 5 shapes, no matter what the crystal lattice structure is. Does not make any difference. I don't care what it is. You could still always trace it back to one of the 5 shapes, which I'll try to show you in a moment. First of all, since we're talking about crystals, there are a lot of crystals out there. Who's ever been to the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show? Okay, all those people, just raise their hand. You can ask them and they'll tell you. There are definitely a lot of crystals in the world. There's so many you can't believe it. And they're finding new ones all the time. Ones they've never seen ever before, with new atomic structures they never knew existed. Every year they find new ones. And they're, I really don't know how many there are. Does anybody have any idea? I have to guess, I'd say 250,000 different, 250,000 different kinds of crystals. I did just that they know of. I'm just guessing at that. I really don't know. There's so many. And the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show has about 8 or 10 hotels with some of them, all the floor structures and every single room in them filled with nothing but crystals. And then you can go into these big auditoriums with nothing but crystals all over there. And it's truly amazing. And it's just, life is, every single mathematical possibility, life has tried it and created a different crystal to form it. Well, all of them will be arranged into 6 categories. There are 6 primary categories that no matter what the crystal you grab a hold of will fit into one of these 6 categories. And those 6 categories are called isometric, tetragonal, hexagonal, orthorhombic, monoclinic, and triclinic. They're all functions of a cube. And it just says, right, this is straight out of the mineralogy book. You can go up here and it says, by distorting, the starting point for all crystal pattern systems is the cube, and by distorting the cell, other cells can be derived. The isometric system is a cube. Tetragonal cube system is a cube with a little piece on top. The hexagonal system is just a cube looking at it from that view, which is a hexagon. And the orthorhombics and the monoclinic and triclinic systems are cubes where you simply change the angle in them. And so there are certain angles that are distorted. And so you've got these, all the basic systems are a function of a cube, another one of the sacred shapes. Now this is where it starts getting a little interesting. This is a fluorite crystal. It's in the shape of an octahedron. Can everybody see it? It's in the same shape as this. It didn't, approximate. It's not perfect like this. It's approximate. It didn't grow, it didn't get cut this way, it grew this way. And actually, to be a little more precise, the matrix of the atoms are in the form of an octahedron. And it comes in these sheets, and whenever you strike it, it breaks into these patterns. So, and I would never do this, but if I was to drop this on the concrete, it would break up into a whole bunch of little tiny octahedrons. This is also fluorite, only it's in a whole bunch of cubes. In mineralogy books, they try to describe this by showing this flat pattern. But down here below, can you all see these? There's something in crystallology that's called truncating. You can truncate a structure to create a different crystal. That simply means you can either cut off an edge and you do it equally all the way around, or you cut off the corners equally all the way around, or you cut off the faces equally all the way around. And that's called truncating. And there's lots of ways that can be done. Well, in this case of a cube, you would truncate the corners. So you cut each of the corners off equally. If you keep doing it, first you cut them off equally all the way around, and you get this structure. And then you keep doing that equally all the way around, you'll come up with this structure, and then you just keep right on doing that, you'll come up with an octahedron. Or the other way around, if you take an octahedron and cut off the tips of it, like you cut off each one of these tips, and you just keep doing that, it will turn back into this one, and then into this one, and then into a cube. It'll go either way. You can start with this one and get this one, or you can start with this one and get this one. And we know that these are duals of each other, so it kind of makes sense anyway. But this is one way of showing it, and that's one way that the textbooks try to describe how these two crystals can do this. It's not saying that that's how it does it. It's just saying that that's a logical way to explain how in the heck the atoms change from cubical to octahedral and back again, doing this. This is a real big piece of fluorite. It's about this big around. You don't find them that big anymore. I mean, they're real, real, real rare. And somebody left it on a ledge in the sunlight, and the bonds that hold the atoms together are so weak that the sunlight, the excitation of the sunlight, cracked this thing. And if you notice where it cracks exactly along the octahedral lines. Right. Up in this corner is a cube. And if you truncate the edges, you cut off the edges all the way around, it moves to this structure, and you keep doing it in terms of this one, and the thing turns into a dodecahedron. This becomes this just by cutting the edges off of a cube. Now, this is pyrite. It grew into a cube. It's a little bit longer axis. It's not a perfect cube. The one end grew a little bit bigger than the other one. But this grew this way. If you look carefully, it looks like somebody cut it and polished it. Nobody touched it. They just took it straight out of the earth. And it came that way. And this one is a perfect dodecahedron. It's just like this, only little. And you'll have to come up and see these later. But it looks like somebody cut this and shaped it, because it is exactly like this, only it's pyrite. It grew this way. Nobody touched it. It grew into this little dodecahedron. Pyrite does exactly the same thing. If you give pyrite enough time, it will grow into cubical. Give it enough time again, it'll grow back into dodecahedral. The same living structure will keep changing shape. It'll oscillate over long periods of time between these two different structures. Well, the dodecahedron, if you come down here and you cut off the points of the dodecahedron, it immediately goes from this to this, just by truncating that. Now each one of these is a different category of crystals. There's a whole spectrum of crystals. I'll show you in just a moment here out of this book. And if you keep truncating the dodecahedron, it not only turns into a nicosahedron, if you keep doing it, the thing will turn into an octahedron. It'll go into one of these. And then if you take one of these and cut off the tip, it turns into this one, which is a real interesting one. This is the shape right here. This is called a cube octahedron because the angles of this, it was originally a cube that's been truncated this way, and the angles of it form an octahedron, which you can see that it came from. It's in between the cube and the octahedron, actually. It's one view of it is a square with a diamond, running like this. This was considered the most sacred shape in existence by Buckminster Fuller. He felt this was the key to everything. And he had a real good reason why he came up with this. He gave it his own name. He called it a cube equilibrium. And the reason is because this is one of them right here. Put it like that. Is that it has a unique property that no other shape known has. And that is that it can, by rotational aspects of the bonds, can become all five of the platonic solids. And to show you, for example, it's already a cube in its basic structure, but by rotating this, it comes down and becomes an octahedron. You see? Can everybody see what it is? If you rotate them this way, it will become a tetrahedron. Of course, I can't line all these bonds up perfectly, but because of this is a physical structure. So you've got the cube already, the octahedron, the tetrahedron. The icosahedron has to be rotated, so looking at this green square in the front, if you rotate it so that the green square forms two equilateral triangles, and you do that all the way around, for the blue one, the green one, the orange one, the red one, all the way around, you have to do it perfectly. But just look at the green square. So there's two equilateral triangles in there. Then that one is an icosahedron. And if you can make the bonds go out the other way, which you can't do with this structure, you got to do it on a computer or something, then it will form a dodecahedron. It contains within it all five of the shapes by rotational patterns. And so he felt that there was something real special about that one, and derived much of his philosophy from this one shape. There's another man named Gerald Langham. It's D as in Gerald, like with a D, Gerald. And Gerald Langham's work was given the name Genesis. And he was a brilliant person who he did a lot of amazing work in botany. He saved South America during World War II by creating a corn that was like a weed. You just threw it out and it just grew. And they were all starving to death, and he saved them, really saved lots of lives. He was studying the sesame seed, and he went in the sesame seed and then deeper and deeper and deeper, and he got in the middle of the sesame seed and he found this little cube right in the center of it. And what that little cube doing down in there? And it's kind of the open sesame seed. It opened his life in long ways. He realized that the cube was the key to seeds. And we're only talking about a few things, but you can go into viruses, for example, are all geometrical packages. Diatomaceous earth, which is the original life patterns on the earth, are all geometrical structures. You can go on and on and on. We're only talking about crystals here and a few other things, but you can carry this through to seeds or all kinds of other areas of life too. And he found that the cube was in there, and then he found these 13 rays that came out of this cube that structured the seed. And then he just took off on that and found out that the same pattern was around the human body. He says, wow, we're just a big seed too. And he then started getting very philosophical and went to metaphysical school and graduated with a PhD in metaphysics in LA. And wrote a thesis that I read, which was really, really good. And since then, he created this thing called Genesis and has thousands of people that follow him. He's one of the people I think are really great because he took the knowledge that he had learned about the grids around the body, and he showed a way that you could use it. Not just information, but he showed a way to apply it. And he did that through dance, through sacred movements of the body. And so he has you move in this particular way, kind of like Tai Chi, where you're moving through and touching the various grid fields and becoming aware of them. And it's very powerful. There's a lot of people who have been deeply influenced by this work. Darrell Langham. He just died. He was in Arizona. But if you're interested in that, this paper I'm going to be giving out has Human Dimensions Institute at North Carolina's phone number on it. And they have one of the teachers there, so she knows all of that work and where you could go to get that work. But so there is this grid also around the human body. And both him and Ann Buckminster Fuller were more concerned with this grid that was around the body than the star tetrahedral field, which is what we're going to be using. If you keep going, it turns into a cube, and then from a cube you can truncate again through these patterns over to this one, which is called a rhombic dodecahedron. That happens to be the dual of the cube equilibrium. Those two are together. There's first the 5, which is like the pentatonic scale, and then there's 2 more that are added, which is the 7 notes of the octave. And then there's another 5 polyhedron that are coming after that, which makes a set of 12, which corresponds with the 12 notes of the chromatic scale. There's actually shape associated with all of these things, but we got to tie this down a lot stronger before we can even begin to talk about that. Anyway, as you keep moving through here, you'll see how each one of these shapes keeps coming back through one of the 5 platonic solids, always. And no matter, each one of these, by the way, is a different set of crystals. This is a crystal book. It's called Rocks and Minerals, and I'll leave it up here and you can look at it. And for example, over on this side of the page over here, it will show the atomic structure. In this case, it's dodecahedral. And these are all the crystals in here, different kinds of crystals that are dodecahedral. All of these up here are tetrahedral, and these down here are cubical. These are all cubical crystals over here. Some of these are unusual shapes that when you first see them, until you truncate them back and find out what the platonic solid is that is hidden behind them. These are all rhombic dodecahedral crystals, and these are all octahedral crystals down here, showing the patterns up here. These are all truncated octahedral crystals. These are hexagonal crystals, which are a function of the cube. These are hexagonal crystals also. These are truncated cubical crystals where just the tips are cut off up over here. And each time you change the internal structure or the way the atoms arrange themselves, you get a physical crystal that looks entirely different. Totally different, has different third-dimensional worlds, third-dimensional attributes. So I think you can get a pretty good idea here. What I'm saying is that you have, and this is only some, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of these things. But no matter which crystal you get, you find out what is crystal and atomic structure, how the atoms are lined up, and you'll find that you can truncate it and come up to with one of the 5 platonic solids, showing clearly that the 5 platonic solids is the underlying key underneath all of your crystalline structures. And all of those 5 platonic solids came out of one of the informational systems out of the fruit of life, which came out of the flower of life. These are the kind of polyhedron that I'm talking about, each one being having a different quality, and your atoms arranging specifically to them. These are the external angles that you see on the crystals will always reflect the internal angles of the atomic atoms. This is also a crystal. It's a water crystal called a snowflake. And it's based upon hexagonal patterns of crystals. No two supposedly have ever been the same. And they're directly at a flower of life manifestation. This is a periodic table of the elements. The elements are all the elemental atoms, different kinds of atoms that create the molecules that make the fabric of the reality. There is 2 atoms on this chart. They're both special. There's one atom on this chart that we will all recognize as being real special to us, and that's carbon, because that's the basis of organic chemistry, of all life that we know, what we call life. But there's another atom on this chart that demonstrates on a chemical level the functions of life absolutely equally, just as well as carbon. And it's the one that's 1 octave below it. This is carbon. There's a fold in this page here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In the same grouping directly below it is silicon, which is what almost all of your crystals are made out of on Earth. Carbon and silicon demonstrate to the chemist equally the principles of life from a chemical level. Now, by that, what I mean is carbon will make all these incredible different bonds and shapes and forms, and just this vast array of different chemical possibilities, and it'll link with just about anything it comes in contact with. So will silicon. Exactly the same. It will make these chains and these links and all these various things on and on and on, and it will link with just about anything that comes near it. It will bond with just about anything. And so chemists for a long time figured that maybe there were silicon life forms on Earth, but they never ever found any. And so they'd only found carbon-based life forms, where spirit had only entered into carbon-based bodies. And so then science fiction movies, taking up on this theme, began in the 1950s, made several movies about the possibility of silicon life forms on other planets, because it appeared, though, that was possible to do. So they dreamed up these things. Those guys who made those movies never dreamed or realized that there were silicon life forms on Earth at the time that they did it. And it hasn't been until just recently that we have gone down deep miles into the crevices of the oceans, way down deep. And we found that there are life forms down there that are alive and living and have no carbon atoms in them at all. They're totally silicon. There are sponges down in there. They're silicon sponges. They're completely alive. You'll see them in a picture that's going to come up here real soon. Am I going to do that? I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. But anyway, we have them right here, right on Earth. They really do exist. On the other hand, we have crystals right here, right now, and we look at these guys, and we say, nah, they're not alive, they're hard, they're not soft like we are, and they don't breathe. So we set these criteria up to correspond with us, and we don't think of them as being alive. But they are. And they're ancient beings, and they've been in one body. We think Thoth has been in a body for 52,000 years, and we go, wow, that's a long time. Well, this one's been there for maybe 500,000 years. Same body. You know, a lot of crystals go back for 1.5 million years in the same body. And spirit is in there. And what's happening on Earth right now? Our relationship with silicon is so powerful. We're not aware. The Earth that we live on is a round ball. It's a silicon ball. The crust of the Earth, which is 30 to 50 miles deep, is made up of 25% silicon, and it reacts with anything that comes near. And that crust, though we pick up Earth and we look at it in dirt that we don't see, but when you get down there just a tiny bit, the entire crust, which is 30 to 50 miles deep, is made up of 87% silicon crystal. It's almost 90%. Live on silicon. And so we don't think of them, you know, we don't realize how closely we are linked with them. And we are almost unconsciously making a marriage with them right now. We're not even really thinking about it that much. Our computers are all made out of, they run on silicon. They run on one of the other life forms of the planet that is alive from my point of view, and conscious, and aware, and has feelings, and everything else, and thinks, and can add and subtract really fast. And they like people a whole lot. And we're creating instruments that are filled with their essence, but based upon our level of consciousness. We're creating instruments where you have to plug in a binary sequence that goes on a phonograph record to get to the memory, which is based on the way we think. There's other ways that could be done. And if you were to just take that computer with just a little bit of changes, that computer would be alive. It would be self-aware. And you wouldn't have to do a lot of the things that you're doing right now. We will come to that because it happens in other planets. Eventually, the silicon and the carbon of a planet link across. And when that happens, the planet has two eyes. It opens up and it has two viewpoints, and the communication happens. We'll eventually get there soon, very soon. I believe 1 more year, 2 more years, definitely by the end of the century, and we'll have self-aware computers that will change history forever. We'll never be the same again. And especially when you see what we're going to explain something about them in a little bit. And however, once we see the possibilities of what will be capable through a self-aware silicon computer, it does not take very much longer to realize that we have the same crystalline structure around us, and the same capabilities and possibilities are within us without the computer. We can do anything a computer can do. We can add and subtract at those speeds. We can do anything the computer can do without the computer. They're just showing us the possibilities of life. They're a lot older life form than we are. They've been around a lot longer.